Hey everyone, latest edition of the Kolpack and Izzo podcast, brought to you by Gate City Bank with the Forum's Jeff Kolpack. I'm Tom Izzo. North Dakota State ready for its home opener for the 2023 season. The University of Maine Black Bears come calling. For the first time, North Dakota State will face a team from the state of Maine out of the Coastal Athletic Association. That's not a new league. They just rebranded the CAA, which was the Colonial, a great name, into this league. They were preseason pick of 13th out of 15 teams in that league. Before we get going, you have done this for nearly 3 decades. You've been all over the country.
Why do you start with the timeline all the time?
It's important to have historical significance.
You're trying to get me to retire. I know.
Not at all.
This is 1 foot out the door. I can feel it.
You already had a foot out the door. After this game Saturday, I don't know if you saw my tweet last night, the Bison will only have 7 states that they haven't played a team from. And I'm going to take off 2 of them with Hawaii and Alaska. So those 5.
New Mexico.
Yep.
Nevada.
Yep.
Well, you're talking just Division One?
The whole 1 and 2.
Yeah, they played Puget Sound, Washington.
Yep.
So
and they've been to Cheney anyway with Eastern Washington too.
I'm going to say they played Central State, Ohio.
One surprised me on this that really I thought they would have played a team from there. You got 2 of the 5.
Okay.
2 others you're going to think, well, they're never going to play schools from there, I would think.
South Carolina?
They have.
They have
played, what's Wofford's down there?
That's right. We could go on forever. What?
Florida.
No.
You believe that? Nobody from Florida, like even in Division II days, and I understand travel was way more limited than it is now, but how many schools are there? They've never played a team from the state of Florida.
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island is the other, and Vermont.
Yes. I've never been to Maine.
Maine is beautiful.
It's the only one of the lower 48 I've not been to.
I was going to say, you've been to almost all of them,
knocked off
right?
New Mexico in our Route 66 trip a couple years ago. So, Maine is the only state I've never been to.
Let me tell you something right now. If they add Nevada, if somehow Nevada and Florida get knocked off the list, I'd be A-okay on that for if we go there or if one of those teams come here. That'd be good stuff. We'll get to the Black Bears in a second, but we've diagnosed and went through the first game. Any other takeaways we haven't talked about from the Bison win over Eastern Washington that we've maybe glossed over that you wanted to talk about before we move on to game 2?
I can't think of any details just other than a general favorable impression of the defense, which to me was the biggest question mark going in, and finding playmakers on defense. So I think we've hashed that over. Now let's see if they can do it again against a CAA team. I know it's the Colonial, but if the Big Ten is still the Big Ten, why can't the Colonial? Can I go off on that?
That's fine. Go for it.
I mean, changing the name just because you added some schools.
You know the assistant commissioner well. You can go off.
Listen here, Commissioner Gordon. Changing the name was unnecessary because the Colonial was a great name.
Correct.
Love the name. It's got historical significance.
Correct.
This isn't all about geography. I mean, the ACC is now in California, for God's sakes.
Right on. God. Couldn't say it any better myself. And they have ballooned to 15. They're going to be 16 next year when Bryant, ironically enough, out of Rhode Island joins. They'll have 16 schools in that league. And
15 football players.
Right. And it goes to another category, another topic to talk about where I think we mentioned this last week, where if you're William and Mary or Delaware, teams that may contend for it, you may have a schedule that lines up that you don't play any of the heavyweights, and you could win the league and go 8-0 and never play one of the top teams in the conference.
Well, Maine this year is not playing Delaware.
Correct.
It's not playing, as I'm going down the list here, New Hampshire, not playing Villanova.
They have to play New Hampshire. That's a rivalry game.
Yep.
But no Nova and no Delaware on there. Which is probably a break for that's probably a break for Maine because they may have a tough goal.
Is Long Island in the league now?
They are not.
I don't think so. They're in the Northeast.
Yes, but they are a
They're on the
Division
schedule.
I. Yep. To that point, and McFeely and I talked about it yesterday when it was our text chain as well. They're getting $250,000 from NDSU to play this game. They only got $250,000 to play the game at FIU.
Well, that tells you the state of FIU football.
Right.
And if you look at FIU football, let's just start there with a comparison that, Maine gave FBS FIU a pretty good run, and frankly should have won the game. And frankly, the head coach should have kicked that field goal in the third quarter. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You need to take the lead.
Take the points. You always tell me that. Take
Craig
the points.
Bowl, baby. Take the points. Take the lead. And when you take the lead against FBS, it just adds another dimension.
It changes everything about the game. It really does.
Puts a little more pressure on the FBS team. So where was I going with this?
Where FIU was at.
Well, scoring defense last year, they were 127th out of 130 in the FBS in scoring defense last year. Lost a games like they lost Western Kentucky 73-0.
Yeah, not good.
40-6 to a bad UTEP team last year.
Right.
Gave up 37.2 points per game. And so I don't know if teams could get that much better in a year. Maybe you can now with the transfer portal. I'm talking about Florida International. But how many out there really know where Florida International was or is? Raise your hand.
I was going to say.
I didn't really know until this week.
It's Miami. Yep. It's another one of those Florida schools out. They got 25.
But did you see the highlights? I don't think there were stands on one side of the field. It's like Murray State. It's like
FIU's in rough shape there. Yeah. It's like Indiana State, frankly.
I'm not. Again, Maine may very well be much improved from 2-9 last year. Yep. I guess this will be a pretty good FCS benchmark for them. We'll see.
Maine is their quarterback situation is really interesting. Derek Robertson is the starter. Matt Entz called him young. He's not. He's a senior, but he only played one snap last year. He was the guy for him in 2021, and he only played a couple snaps in the spring of 2020. So it's an intriguing guy from just outside of New York City, Yonkers, New York. 12 touchdowns, 4 picks in 2021. He got beat out, it seems like, Jeff, is probably the best way to describe it, of the job last fall, and now he's the guy again. 6'2", 205 pounds as the starting QB for the Black Bears.
Well, the challenge now will be coming in a dome. I think it's going to be a pretty good crowd, just looking at what's available. On a lot of sections are already sold out. The predictable ends are still tickets available. But he's going to have to deal with a crowd. He's going to have to deal with the noise. I mean, this is stuff that guys in this league don't have to. FCS in general.
Correct.
You rarely have to deal with crowds. Montana, maybe sometimes Northern Iowa, the Fargo Dome, South Dakota State sometimes.
UND
for sure. Yep. UND. I don't know what it's like at Northern Arizona and Idaho and those
it
domes.
It doesn't have an atmosphere.
Yeah,
I don't know, but venture to guess there.
But generally in FCS, he'll have to deal with that, and we've seen over the years, it's a broken record, that first-time opponents coming to this place just generally have a tough time.
I looked at, I was doing my game chart. 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen are sophomores or younger.
I saw that. I put that in my game day matchup.
That's if you're the Bison defensive line, if you're Jeff Phelps and Nick Gazer, you're looking at that saying, okay, we may have an opportunity to get after things here with a really inexperienced and young offensive line.
They all have the size and the part, but that doesn't mean nothing anymore.
Correct.
Offense, everybody's 300. Right. Everybody's 6'5",
Everybody 300. Can move. You have to have playing
Well, no,
experience.
not everybody can move. That's the difference.
Yeah, but you have to have experience playing, to me, and that to me, Maine lacks that in a big-time way. They do have a talented running back. I know Big E wrote about him. Tristan Keenan, who made his college debut last week, was the CAA Rookie of the Week, scored the only touchdown for Maine in the loss to
also
FIU.
Fumbled twice, too.
He did have that, and he put it on the ground a couple times, and that's something to keep an eye on for this game on Saturday. They're limited. I mean, this is a game, if you're North Dakota State, this is a chance to, again, get some more guys out there, get some more reps for some, maybe spread it out more. I mean, 3 guys got their first catch in last Saturday's game. I'm looking at that, Jeff. That to me, if I'm NDSU, this is an opportunity for us to get some more work in on defense and play a quality football game.
What I want to know from Maine is Randy Moss going to be here?
I don't think so.
The father of Monago Moss, the junior receiver, one of their best guys, by the way. He's 6'1", 220.
Be awesome if he was.
Has Randy's weight, but not his height.
There's
probably not his speed if he's FCS.
Very few that have that have what Randy possesses. But yes, one of his sons does play at the University.
When was the last
Maine.
time a celebrity's kid played here? Was it?
Oh boy,
I'm thinking who was the kid from? Escapes me. The movie, The Philadelphia, the Eagles.
Vince Papale?
Yeah, his
Delaware
son.
kid. Yeah, maybe.
He was here.
Yes, that's right. That was 2018.
I think we talked to him. One of us talked to him.
Another CAA team. God, you might be right.
And maybe the last celeb kid to come to the Fargo Dome.
Good work on that. The invincible guy. Vince Papale, who his son played for the University of Delaware on that 2018 team. To me, that's how this game shapes up, right? And when you look at it, they are a 30-point favorite over Maine.
That seems a lot to me, doesn't it, or not? For a team that just lost to 2 to an FB. I know it's Florida National.
It's a lot of points.
I'd almost consider taking the points.
But you look at NDSU at home against these teams has typically buried them, and that's what the charge is that they need to do on Saturday against a team like this. You let them hang around like they did on Saturday with FIU, and well, you got a football game on our hands in the second half on Saturday, in my estimation. Because they're not totally devoid of talent, but again, like I am with Eastern Washington, we said it last week, I'm intrigued to see what happens as the Eagles go into their season. Same with Maine. So let's see what happens with them after this game on Saturday, because Jeff, they played late Saturday night. It was a 4.5-hour football game. Flew all the way back to Orono.
Got home at 5.
Yeah, they didn't do anything Sunday, didn't do anything Monday. Then back practicing Tuesday. They got to get right back on the airplane tomorrow, fly halfway across the country. That takes a toll on you, man. I don't care who you are.
South Dakota State found something like that similar 2 years ago in the playoffs. Granted, it was the third game at Montana State. They're flying all over the place.
Heck, Maine ran into that same thing in the playoffs in 2018. Remember, they beat Jacksonville State at home, then flew to Weber, and Ogden won that game, flew back home, then flew all the way to Cheney and ran out of gas in the semifinals that year against Eastern Washington. They won 10 games that year. Since that game, they've won a total of 16 games over the last 4 years. Things have certainly gone off, I wouldn't say gone off the rails. They had a coaching change. Their head coach got moved up, actually was assistant with P.J. Fleck at Minnesota. You've seen this, though. We've covered FCS for long enough that you have teams that bubble up, have one really good year.
Rhode Island had a good year.
Right, and maybe make a deep playoff run, and then we don't hear from them again. And Maine may fit that to a T on this right now.
I think Richmond is fitting that bill.
Good example there. Richmond was a semifinalist in 2015. They have been in the playoffs a couple times. They haven't done anything since. That's a good example on that. Yep. So I'd be interested to see how this plays out for Maine. Before we get into more heavy stuff on the Bison, you wrote the story today. You can check it out at inforum.com. I know we're going to have more of it on Bison Game Day, because instantly when older Bison fans hear the name Maine, they think of, well, there was a game that was supposed to be played in September of 2001, and North Dakota State was still Division II at the time. Maine was an FCS power, Division 1A power at the time. 1AA, excuse me, at the time. And September 11th happened, and the following day, the football game was canceled, Jeff. And even still, I spoke with Steve Lockway about it, who was a member of that team, saying, we were really looking forward to that. It was an opportunity, and we'll never know how that was going to play out.
Yeah, the Monday Bob Babbage press conference, he was referring it to almost like a playoff atmosphere. They were expecting 15,000 fans.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was big.
Big crowd at that time.
Because NDSU around then was drawn 8, 9, 10,000 in that area.
Yeah.
Something like that. And they were expecting 15,000 for the Maine. The Monday press conference again was like, okay, here's a comparison.
Yeah.
Let's see. The Bison were coming off a semifinal season in 2000. Killed Angelo, I believe was it Angelo State?
Yeah.
Angelo State, and then a Texas team. No. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They
I'm looking anyway here. Keep going.
Western State, maybe, something like that. Anyway, they killed two teams in their first two non-conference.
2001 season.
Yep. And when it comes to that, put up. And so everybody's looking forward to that. Lamar Gordon, who eventually got drafted.
You had it, by the way. Angelo State to start. Western State was the second game. So you got it. Don't doubt yourself. You know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, and then all of a sudden, obviously Tuesday morning happens, and the 9/11 terrorist attacks. What followed, I talked to Gene Taylor this week, who was in first year as the AD at NDSU. Talked to Babbage this week, who's retired from the NFL, golfing a lot in South Carolina. And on Wednesday, Gene said, I went out there, and the biggest issue was they weren't sure if Maine could get a flight because everything was grounded. Right. The federal government grounded all flights. On Wednesday, he goes out to practice and delivers the news, and he said the team's looking at him like, who are you?
Yeah. I remember him telling me that was his first actual correspondence with the team. Meaning he had spoken maybe with individual players, but that was his first address to the team was to tell them that the game wasn't happening. That's a heck of a way to introduce yourself as the new athletic director. But it ended up being obviously a smart. Nobody played. Remember, there was nothing happened that weekend.
As it should be. I mean, it was obviously a horrible situation, and I remember that. I remember I was in the living room watching my then 1-year-old son, and I think I almost saw it live. I was right there. Yeah. I had the TV on, and you're like, oh god. Yeah. It kind of reminded me of the disaster with the space shuttle.
I was a kid watching that live,
and I was in my college fraternity house. Didn't see it live, but saw the first replay, and so we were all watching it in disbelief. And so, obviously, different circumstances, but the feeling was kind of the same.
I was a senior in college. As everyone knows, I'm from New York. I have many, many, many friends who live in New York City. My college, we have a huge population that comes from the New York City area. Up to Oswego, and it was surreal. It really was.
Do you know anybody who lost?
I had two friends that lost
parents,
cousins.
Oh, yeah.
That day, and it was in your story, and it was echoing to me. And I'll tell this quick, and then we'll get on to the football stuff. My hometown, we have 3 nuclear power plants, including one that's not very far from where my dad still resides. And I drove home that day because I still lived with my dad at the time, and got out of the car, and I was shook. It was just, you couldn't believe it. Anybody couldn't. And I got into my car, and the ground started shaking. And the next thing I know, 2 F-15s come flying over our house, and they're heading for the nuclear power plant because we didn't know. It was the middle of the afternoon. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Because at the end, I'm like, holy, like, this is
war.
Like, we have, like, this is happening. I remember looking at my dad and like, okay, this is beyond anybody's imagination.
Were you thinking you had to get in the car and head far away from the nuclear?
We may have to evacuate. I mean, you didn't know. You had no idea at the time. That's when it really, to me, because my hometown is 4.5 hours from New York City. Didn't mean I wasn't affected, but that, like, okay, this is beyond real. And I encourage anybody if it has the means, the ability to go and see the 9/11 memorial. It is. I was in New York City, Kolpack, 2 months before it happened. I was in the Twin Towers, July of 2001. It was my first time ever going and seeing it. And then 6 weeks later is what happened.
I remember talking to the Maine athletic director that week. Yeah. I must have talked to her on Wednesday, I believe, or Tuesday. No, it must have been Wednesday. And Suzanne Tyler is her name. I don't know if she's still there. Probably not. And she said the biggest issue, also another one, was they have players who, again, like, anybody in the East Coast have family members from that area who work there. And so they were uncertain of that.
Right. Just all of that. You just didn't know. You just didn't. And sometimes you didn't know for days. That was the scary part about it. There's no easy segue here to transition to chat on football. I just went back and looked at that 2001 Maine team. They made the tournament that year, Jeff. They beat McNeese State on the road, ended up losing at Northern Iowa in the second round in the quarterfinals that year.
Oh, so they made a rebound from the previous year of 5-6.
Yeah, they made it to 2001. They made it to the semis, and then that was the year Montana ended up winning one of its many championships in that run in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Maine probably would have won that game.
Yeah, that would have been a good game. At least it would have been fun to see how it panned out. All right, 2 things I want to talk about here before we wrap up and do some picks. So one of the huge takeaways from the game on Saturday was Cole Payton getting a couple of series, scored another touchdown and a 70-yard beauty. I know Mike McFeely visited with him. I have as well. He asked the question, can you throw? Where's the passing game? Like, where are things at? But I think the question isn't going to go away until we see a sustained series.
Yes.
And here's my point. If the game gets out of hand on Saturday, I understand the tendency is, okay, we're going to run the ball and get out of here. I wouldn't do that. I would, even if it's 35-3, we need to see what this kid can do. If it's 3rd and 7, Kolpack, I want to see him throwing the ball.
I have no problem in the third quarter or early fourth with the backups playing and playing like they mean it rather than just
full reps.
Yes. If it's backups versus backups, I don't think that's a big deal. I don't think that's a sportsmanship issue, if you will. Not like running a trick play when you're up 28-0 on Drake or whatever.
Right.
So I don't think it's a sportsmanship issue in that regard. Your starters are on the bench. You already called the dogs off by doing that.
He's got to throw though,
and so exactly. So it's and that's all about setting your team up for the future. That's not about rubbing noses or trying to. The Albany coach might
Greg
digress.
Gattuso may disagree on that viciously, but I think it's interesting though. They gave him the first series to start the second half. I think that goes back to what
confidence builder.
You asked Matt Entz about that before the opener. The first Monday press conference, he says it's going to be unique. It's going to involve, and I imagine we're going to see something different on Saturday with number 9 out there.
And I'm thinking that number 9 has a little different level of confidence this year, just knowing that he's probably a little more involved.
Yep.
He's older, He's in his third year in the program.
Correct.
So you should be able to, if you're ever going to be handed the keys, you might as well do it with the game on the line now.
He's faster than I think people think. He ran away.
He's deceptively fast.
He ran away from guys on that touchdown run. Even the run to start the second half, he was bobbing and weaving guys.
Eastern guys, I don't think they were slow.
No.
And he had the deep back almost had a slight angle on him, and on the he ran away from him.
Ran away from him is right on that. Defensive line, I wanted to hit on that because we talked a ton about the linebackers, but I thought the defensive line was active, and you saw that what Eli Mostart can bring back there. Granted, I know he had the blocked field goal, but just his presence up there freed up other guys. Dylan Hendricks, I thought, had a nice game as well. Jake Cava had a nice game. You can roll 7-8 guys when you have that kind of flexibility up there.
Yeah, the 2-deep chart means nothing when it comes to the defensive line. You got the Mostarts, Derek, Dutenheffer inside.
Heisman, you see Heisman on there.
You see Heisman's
he had
name.
a sack in the game.
And very athletic sack. Looked good. So, and we thought this was an area that would be better than last year just based on experience. The big enough, Dutenheffer's 282, Derek's 280. I thought Derek came on late last year.
They're a year older and a year stronger, all in that spot. I really believe that. Cole Menz played well.
He had some plays.
Rokes ended up flashing late in that game, too.
McCaslin got some time.
Just keep an eye on it. That's another position group there. I will ask you this because we visited with Jason Petrino. We did this on Hot Mic, that he's calling the plays from the booth. Again, I'm not trying to date you, but do you know how many Bison defensive coordinators?
No idea, man.
Do you know of any? Like in the Division I era, I can't think of any that have been up top.
Hazelton was on top.
Mike Bresky? I don't remember.
He was on top. I think he might have been on down. He might have been on the field.
Kyle Nystrom, he was on the field, right? He was down below. And I know after that, Hazelton was next to Bowl. Kleiman was next to Bowl. Entz was next to Kleiman.
I'm just trying to think who have run into the elevator.
That's what I'm thinking. I in my time here, the defensive coordinator has always been on the field. But Petrino told me that it devoids him of emotion, its ability to see everything. And
Has he always done that?
He's always done that. The only time he didn't, obviously, was when he was the head coach at Carroll College. Every other time he's been up on the booth, and he prefers it up top, which is interesting. And it's another different angle of what we're going to see from the Bison defense this year. Worked in game one.
Entz certainly was on the field.
Yep. Everybody I can think of. Entz, David Braun, everybody has been down below. So that's a different thing for Bison fans that are going to the game or watch the game on television.
So both your coordinators are in the booth.
Up top. And he's relating the calls down to Gazer, Olson, and Lewis Walker, mostly between
Lewis
Gazer.
Walker was on top.
Yeah.
He was in the booth last year.
And now he's down He's down field side doing that here in 2023. We will save the big picks because we got some actual games this week, unlike last week.
The one at Brookings is going to be the matchup of the year.
Well, give me a little synopsis of that because we won't have a ton of time on Bison game day. What I'm
just telling you, since 2017, Montana State has played NDSU and South Dakota State 7 times.
Okay.
You take away the one playoff where the Jacks were traveling all over the country that Montana State won at home. Take that away, and the average margin of score has been 41.2 to 15.5.
That's between
Montana State,
SDSU.
and XDSUs.
Wow.
I'm just giving away my stuff.
Do you think it's going to be any closer on? I don't think so. The game we saw December in Brookings, I don't think is
until I
different
see it again. Until I see different,
and that tells you exactly the status of where things are at this division. Because if we think SDSU is up here, the Bison, there's probably a noticeable gap there, and then there's going to be a noticeable gap between them and Montana State. That's not great for this division for this entire season.
I think it goes to show just how much NDSU and SDSU have elevated themselves in the subdivision.
And separated themselves.
I don't think these other programs have gotten worse, obviously.
No.
And they probably actually, when Montana was winning all those games and Big Sky titles in 1995 to 2010, I don't think they're any worse now. I think just other teams have gotten better.
Yeah, I agree. And just set themselves apart from everybody else there. We'll do a couple pick'ems here if you want to do that.
Sure.
How about our boy Craig Bull? Walk-off winner there against Texas Tech.
Do you see what he was wearing before the game?
I did not, and you texted.
Yeah, he had a cowboy-looking suit coat, no tie, no suit, looking cowboy tough. He's changed his ways.
They have Portland State at home in Laramie on Saturday.
No way Portland wins that game.
Wyoming be 2-0.
Yep.
Keep an eye on what happens there in Laramie.
Will this be Craig's last year? What if he goes 9-3?
Have you heard anything? I haven't.
I've heard whispers.
Yeah. Interesting. Something to keep an eye on there. I mean, we're his year 11 in Laramie. Something to just keep an eye on him, what plays out west this year. Let's see. Wofford and William and Mary. William and Mary won its opener. They actually kind of struggled in their opener. Wofford's 0-1. William and Mary they're going to handle that game, I think, pretty easily there.
Coastal Athletic team.
Yes.
Coastal Athletic.
Is there an FBS upset here? Idaho, who's one of the national darlings in the FCS, at Nevada. Nevada lost its opener.
That's a good FBS game for Idaho. That's
what I think. It might be a sneaky chance there for our first FCS over FBS win of the season may happen in that game. I'm going to take Idaho there. I keep an eye on the Fighting X.
Nevada should just go FCS, change places with North Dakota State.
Get their spot in the Mountain West Conference.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah, I appreciate you just being out front with it. Mo State and Tennessee Martin. I thought Mo State would have showed better against Kansas. They end up losing by 30 points.
I'm not sure they're sold on quarterback. I didn't hear anything that one guy is head and shoulders above the other. That's where it always starts. I mean, to win these non-conference games, well, Tennessee Martin is pretty good.
UT Martin has beaten Mo State.
Man, you got to be good behind center.
Yep. I'm going to take Martin in that game. I think Mo State might be. I don't think they're going to be all that great, Mo State, in 2023.
Coaching change. Bobby Petrino can flat out get players.
There's no doubt. We've seen that is readily apparent. Before we go, the big game of the weekend where game day is going to be at, this is a future conference game between Texas and Alabama. The game's in Tuscaloosa. It'll be on ESPN on Saturday night. Next year, these are SEC rivals.
I just can't get my hands around that yet.
What do you make of Sarkisian's team? They got a chance to go to Tuscaloosa and win?
Well,
that'd be a statement win there.
It'd be it's like NDSU going up to Montana in 2003, 20 years ago this week.
Check that out on the Bison Game Day story on Saturday at Inforum.com.
And very fun story to do, by the way. And making a statement win saying, okay, we can compete in the SEC, talking about Texas.
Bama's they're a 7-point
still
favorite.
Bama, right?
Yeah, Bama's
still
Bama
win. At home.
But Texas scared the heck out of them last year. That game in Austin last year was really, really good.
Does Texas have enough money to compete?
They better find it since they're going into that league full time next year. Let me throw that to you before we go.
And before we go, what do we think Duke's collective is? They've all of a sudden gotten really good last 2 years.
Yes.
A little suspicious, isn't it?
It's not suspicious. It's allowed. You can do it now.
That's what I'm saying.
You can
That's
do
what
that.
I'm saying. I'm saying they must have put together a pretty good collective to get players.
I think Clemson is going the other way. I think the shine is off.
I thought they had better athletes than Clemson.
They did. They were faster.
Yeah.
Clemson looks slow compared to some of Duke's guys. Before we go, I want to give you some full runway to tease this because I'm excited to read it. Was going back and watching the game. Yesterday was the 20-year anniversary. Last week we had the 10-year anniversary of the Bison win over Kansas State. This week is the 20-year anniversary of what many believe is the go moment for Division I, the Bison victory in Missoula over
And in
Montana.
this story I track the genesis of NDSU's Division I success to one play. Can I just leave it at that?
Wow, that's a great tease.
One play.
Yeah. Is it the missed field goal?
Nope.
The Mike Weezer touchdown?
Nope.
The fake? Oh, all
Nope.
right, all
The
right.
genesis, the play
Okay.
that changed
All right.
the momentum of that game.
I asked McFeely this. I'll ask you, what's your fondest 2 or 3 takeaways, without giving away your tease, fondest 2 or 3 takeaways of that game and what happened afterwards?
Well, certainly the fake field goal was number one.
Rod Malone to the late, great Mike Weezer for the go-ahead score.
I thought Kyle Steffes being able to run pretty consistently
Yep.
was number two.
As a freshman, Steffes was in 2003 on that team.
And number three, the sheer shock of the stadium after that field goal was missed by a 40-yard field goal by Chris Snyder missed.
I can't remember if it was Dave Sampson or who got the photo of Taylor and Bowl hugging after that, the first of many that we would see between the two over the next decade. But the sheer elation on their faces, and I wasn't here, just watching and reading the stories on it. You could tell, I mean, even to them, Jeff, that was a complete shock that they went and won the game.
I remember talking to Craig Bull earlier that week outside the BSA. That's where the coach's office were. And I said, I don't know if you guys compete? I mean, you guys are going to get blown. He goes, shh, don't tell my guys that. And that was the game where they flew into Helena, had to bus.
Because of the wildfires.
Because of wildfires. So then they got in like late at night, like 10 o'clock at night, the previous night.
On Friday night,
yeah.
And still had to
missed the
bus.
walkthrough because that was the days when they'd fly, do a walkthrough at the opposing stadium.
That was the end of the walkthrough.
And that was the end of the opposing Friday walkthroughs. That now since then they've always practiced in Fargo and then flown away.
20 years later, it's still not happening.
That's where it started.
Wow. Looking for that. You can read it actually physically in the newspaper on Saturday. It'll be available tomorrow.
Tomorrow online.
Friday
Yep.
at Inforum.com.
7:30 a.m. online.
Oh, it's scheduled for then. So there you go.
And I'll just say it was the play.
Don't say anything else. You've teased it. You don't want to give it away.
Married a Bison basketball player.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All
Leave it
right.
at that.
Good stuff. Don't forget, of course, we'll be with you on Saturday. Jeff, Kyle Emanuel, Logan Campbell, and myself on Bison Game Day. Starts at 10 a.m. on WDAY. The kickoff show at 2:20, and then we get going with Maine and North Dakota State just after 2:30 on WDAY. The home opener, as Kolpack mentioned, looks like it'd be a pretty decent crowd, not a sellout crowd.
Good tailgate day, people. Get out there.
It should be fun. For Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. That's the latest Kolpack and Izzo podcast brought to you by Gate City Bank.